Whoa! Welcome to the What's Over the podcast. We fashion ourselves cinematic judge and jury. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with my co-host, Alec Burgess.
Let's get it.
We appreciate you tuning in. Go ahead and hit that follow, subscribe, like, bell notification buttons. Hit all those buttons. Help you keep up with our content, when new things are coming out, what we're doing. Also, it'll help us grow the podcast, which we appreciate. So to continue in that vein, tell a friend about us. Tell your family about us. Tell a silent film actor about us. Or just any kind of film actor. I won't go down the other roads that I was thinking about saying to tell you, because hopefully you don't know any of them. But with that, we are reviewing today Chaplin. It was released January 8th, 1993. It was written by David Robinson, partially Charles Chaplin himself, and Diana Hawkins. It was directed by Richard Attenborough. It stars. Okay, I got to get ready for this. Jesus.
Yeah.
It stars Robert Downey Jr., Geraldine Chaplin, Paul Reese, John Thaw, Moira Kelly, Anthony Hopkins, Dan Aykroyd, Marissa Tomei, Penelope Ann Miller, Kevin Kline, Maria Patillo, Mila Jovovich, Deborah Moore, Diane Lane, Nancy Travis, James Wood, Jesus. No, he wasn't in it. And then Kevin Dunn.
It took me a second.
Got you on that one. Oh, shit. It's quite the cast list. And there's more, but I stopped. And elderly Charlie Chaplin discusses his autobiography with his editor, recounting his amazing journey from his poverty-stricken childhood to worldwide success after the ingenious invention of the Little Tramp. Yeah, dude, I'm excited to talk about this movie because I know Charlie Chaplin holds an interesting place in both of our hearts. We've done a couple of his movies here on the podcast, so if you haven't listened to those reviews, go check it out. We've done The Great Dictator as well as The Immigrant. So, yeah, both of which are heavily shown in because it's two of his most famous and the two that got him in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about his past and his history, like in our reviews of his movies and some of the things that got him in trouble. And so a lot of the things you see portrayed in this film, but there's also a lot of things and pieces of his personality and who he was that we haven't talked about because they weren't relevant to the movies we were reviewing and things like that. But I'm excited to talk about it. But I also know, like, based on our previous review where, you know, you were talking about, because I'm with you, like there's certain biopics which continue. This is the final one in our biopic month, where you're like, I don't know if I want to see what they have to say about this person because, but just like Johnny Cash, you're like, you have such an attachment to, you know, Charlie Chaplin and what he does. Like, I don't want that to fuck up my view of what I have and the things that I have. So I love this film. Obviously, this was my pick. I love this film. I love what it tells. I love the acting. I think there are a lot of pieces that I want to talk about that I think could have been done differently in this movie. Like, it's not a perfect film. Not to give away my rating too early or what my rating won't be, but I do think it's very good. And I think it does a very good job of telling Chaplin's story to a degree. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so you're 2 for 2 again. I hadn't seen Chaplin, and I'd avoided it because I didn't want to watch a biopic about Chaplin. I was like, I'm good. And I'll say, like, the beginning part, right, where we have his young life was cool, his early life. Mm-hmm. When we first see Robert Downey Jr., I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it because he's got the look.
Yeah.
Right. But he does not have the voice.
Yeah.
And I didn't really believe he was Chaplin.
Sure.
And we fast forward through his kind of like, vaudeville career. Mm-hmm. And we get to where he creates the Tramp. And I got goosebumps when he came out dressed as a tramp. And when they have an amazing shot of him walking away, doing Chaplin's
figuring it out.
figuring it out his iconic walk, and I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Because then I was like, oh, I'm bought in. And then Robert Downey Jr., I'm assuming he's the one who's doing all the stunts, does a phenomenal job of replicating this physical comedy that we talked about with Chaplin that nobody really should be able to replicate.
Yeah.
But he does a really, really good job of making it work with his movements and the, perfectly placed jump or, cane that knocks someone over. And this physical comedy that's really difficult to pull off, Robert Downey Jr. does a really good job. So from that point, I was bought in. But it took a while to get there. Like the early life stuff was kind of cool, but I was like, And then Robert Downey Jr. came out, I was like, oh, fuck. And then when he created the Tramp, I was bought in. I was like, okay, this makes sense. This is good. So if they had started it from there, I would have been fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. It's a little rough when you first see him as the old man in the, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's funny. And that's the first time you get to see him recreating that physical comedy, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, whoa, okay. I got this. But I'm with you. Like he doesn't have, I think it was an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing to talk about because I think you can see his progression as an actor to get better throughout filming as this character or this person that isn't a character, that is a character. So it's really interesting because by the end of it, I'm with you. Like I'm fully committed to this performance. And he was nominated for an Oscar for it. Didn't win, which
seems to be a running thing.
Yeah, it seems to be a theme this month for us when we talk about Oscars and who should have won and who shouldn't have. I don't know. I haven't looked up to see who did win. But it's so good to me. And I'm with you. Like I didn't know much about before this film Chaplin's young life, right? Like I knew he was impoverished because that was typical for this era,
time
right?
period in London.
Yeah. And so, but I didn't know like that his mother had the mental issues that she had. I do think, quick call out, that it was really cool that his daughter got to play his mother, who she looks a lot like in this film. So I thought that was really cool. That happened. That's really neat. But yeah, like it's just so intriguing to me to see where he comes from. And it explains a lot because I knew a lot about Chaplin as an adult, that he's kind of a dick in personal life stuff, right? He was so overly committed to his craft that he barely had time for relationships, period, right? And then he was also, he's involved because he pissed off J. Edgar Hoover, and the guy gets just beat up for being a communist because he was a free thinker versus,
an actual member of the Communist Party.
Yeah, it wasn't even close to a member of the Communist Party.
Nice job, McCarthy.
Yeah, what a dick. These guys are like, seriously, like, I don't know. That's a whole different conversation, but like the whole J. Edgar Hoover, fuck, how did that even, how was that allowed to work for 50 years? You know what I mean?
Right. Like the personal vendetta that he had because of a couple dinner rolls is ridiculous. Like I make fun of people on way worse levels every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's, when I think back, and we've talked about government corruption quite a few times on our podcast, and it's a favorite topic of ours.
Mm-hmm.
And it's scary. I'm waiting for my lights to go out
again.
But in the grand terms, like when I look back on history, and this is really not part of this movie, other than the problems that he had because of Hoover being personally offended by him, the fact that like the Hoover parse, and look, government's always been corrupt to a level because you give people that much power, they're always going to find a way to become corrupted in almost every case. J. Edgar Hoover, at that point, like, to me, is when the corruption of the government started to be like on the face. It wasn't a dirty secret that was kept in darkly lit rooms and back corners of Washington. And it was at the forefront because everybody saw J. Edgar Hoover do it and do it in plain sight, no questions asked. And then when he got away with it,
oh yeah,
we can get away with it. Nobody's going to do anything because of who and what we are. So let's just do it. So like, it's an interesting take to see it rolled into this story of this guy that really just wanted to make a difference and make people laugh, make people smile because of his difficult upbringing and the fact that he dealt with a lot of depression issues and he dealt with a lot of manic issues and then he had a lot of hard time with human interaction. And now we get to see that he was doing all of this to help people not to get a release from all these things that he was dealing with as well. But then he was punished for it because he made fun of the wrong guy. Like it just, fuck, I just don't like, it's so dastardly. And then we missed out on how many years of possible content because he was driven out of the country.
Oh, so many years. And it just like what you said about the making fun of the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Because he was, I mean, we get a little glimpse of that where his kind of brother's trying to tell him, hey, back off, back off, back off. And he's like, no, this is what makes sense. This is what the people want. Very much, he understood his audience and what he was going for. And he's like that pure entertainer, right? Yeah. Where you never think that anybody's taking what you're doing seriously.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't think it was a big deal because it wasn't to him, right? He was just telling a joke. That's all he was doing. But other people were taking real offense to his jokes. And that's the, them problem. But him in this pure entertainer kind of, mindset he had, didn't see the danger, we'll say, of what he was doing. Despite of, people telling him like Douglas Fairbanks and, his brother and everybody else in Hollywood trying to tell him, hey, you have to play the game. And he didn't even really realize for a long time that there was a game.
Yeah.
Or rules that you had to follow. He was just out to make people laugh, like he said.
Yeah, he just did his thing, man. Like he didn't care. Like it wasn't like, and even like when he did get political, he got political for the right reasons, right? It wasn't like, and that's the crazy piece is like, and at this time of the world, like everybody was being political to try to be powerful, right? And he's trying to be political because he understood what people needed. And the fact that he saw, and we talked about this when we did The Great Dictator, he saw the problem with Hinkle long before anybody else really did, to the point that everybody was like, what are you talking about? This guy's harmless. Well, we know that's not true anymore. Yeah. And they even talk about in this movie, he becomes a genius overnight because even though, it doesn't last long for him, unfortunately, because no matter how much of a genius, he's still a problem for Hoover. But I don't know. It's crazy to me to watch it play out. You can read the stories, you can hear about it, but then watching it, they did such a good job of playing it out in this film, especially that piece of it. And the fact that you early on find out that he's being interviewed by his editor in Switzerland. You're like, why the fuck's this dude in Switzerland? Like he's a British national that was famous in America and really jump-started Hollywood. I mean, United Artists is still a thing. Like, that is still a studio. Like, until I watched this movie years ago, I didn't know that United Artists was started by Chaplin. At least in part, right? Those three are who started it. So it's just like, holy shit balls. Like, I didn't realize until this movie, I knew who Chaplin was, but I didn't realize until I watched this movie how instrumental he was in all of Hollywood. Not just silent films and comedy and that physical comedy in The Tramp, but Hollywood in general, what it is today would not be without Chaplin.
Yeah, he really helped kind of like break open the floodgates to make it an everybody thing. Yeah, right? Because Hollywood movies and everything was, like for the rich or for a certain demographic of people, and it wasn't for everybody. And Chaplin found a way to really bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And, people would go see Chaplin's films because they could relate to them in a much better way than you could a Douglas Fairbanks film, who, by the way, Kevin Kline as Douglas Fairbanks, I was upset that we didn't have an Errol Flynn biopic with Kevin Kline playing Errol Flynn.
Right?
Like, that was cool.
Yeah.
Him portraying Douglas Fairbanks was very, very cool.
Yeah. And that's something else to even talk about with this movie is we went through the cast and it's got everybody but Jesus, but like
Yeah.
the whole fucking thing. And it's crazy when you think about, because 1992, 93, because technically this film came out in 92 in order to get it on the ballot for the Oscars in the 92 year. It didn't release nationwide until 93. But there are so many up and coming at the time in the 90s actors. Like there's established actors like Hopkins. Downey Jr. at this point was already very well established. Dan Aykroyd was well established. Marissa Tomei was just starting to get started, right? She was up there, but she was new. Penelope Ann Miller. Nobody who knew who Penelope Ann Miller was in 93. Not really, right? Kevin Kline was established, but then you had Nancy Travis, who eventually became Diane Lane. Don't even get me started there. She's one of the greatest actresses of our generation. This was one of her earliest films, and she's only in it for a minute, but the impact that she has as his third wife is amazing, right? Like the oldest of his wives, like when he got married, and the fact that she throws it at him. Well, I'm too old for you. Like that shit's crazy to me. The amount of people that were in this movie that eventually became A-list movie carrying stars. So the cast in this movie is out. David Duchovny.
Yeah.
As the editor guy. But yeah, to your point, like there are parts that were played that you're like, well, I want to see more of that. Like I want to see more Kevin Kline.
Yeah.
I want to see, honestly, I wanted to see more Marissa Tomei. And even though that actress eventually had a very tragic end, right? Like I'm interested in that story. How'd we get there, right? Like I want to know more about what's the one that started it, oh God, Fairbanks' wife, Pickford. I want to know more about Mary Pickford. Like it's interesting what this movie leads you to go, oh, I'm so curious about this.
Yeah, because it's such a cool time period, right? This is the Hollywood heyday.
Yeah.
And so you have these, titans in the industry, the ones who started it. You have these huge titans of this industry that are all kind of working together to make this the best they possibly can, and to make this this industry that hasn't really ever gotten off on the right foot to be something that people want to go see every day. And so, yeah, I want more of those stories, because you have, all these people that I want to see more of that, and I want to see more in that, because this is a time in Hollywood where it's the golden age, or you're entering into the golden age.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so intriguing. Like, and I laugh because you see Fairbanks and him crawling on the Hollywood sign. You think you're going to see Hollywood, but it was their first sign when it was Hollywood Land, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, this is so crazy, because you don't see a lot of movies that you'll see movies that are taking place in that time, but they don't talk about that time in Hollywood and how it's this transitioning period. Because they also talk about in this movie, there's like a moment of mention where nobody takes Hollywood serious at this moment, right? Like this isn't a real career.
Aren't allowed in restaurants.
Yeah, like these people are outcasts trying to, and then they all like to like the government. I don't remember. I think it was Hoover in the dinner where they were talking about how, they're just troublemakers. They're just troublemakers.
Yeah, or like their only use is for propaganda.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To be a tool for the government to use. Which a little bit now, but anyways,
sure.
But you have this kind of very, different opposing viewpoints at a dinner table with, the actors should be like, no, we're more in it for the entertainment, what we can do and the stories we can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hoover is like, no, you're in it because I can control what people think through what you say and do.
Yep. Yeah.
Hoover's such a dick.
Oh God, the guy was an ass. How did he stay in power for 50 years? Anyway, whatever. Because he made people. Well,
yeah, anybody who didn't like him, he got rid of.
Yeah, he divided the nation, and anyway, that he's a problem. Here's another thing that we don't talk about, because Chaplin's lauded as one of the greatest, and he is. There's no question about it. Like he changed Hollywood. He helped create Hollywood. One of the funniest physical comedy, but the guy had some issues. And don't get me wrong. In the early 1900s, early 20s, 30s, like marrying someone that was underage was not the faux pas. There was less understanding of what that did to children at the time, but the maturity level and the understanding, like it was different, right? So he still caught shit for it, but it wasn't like he could go to jail for it under most circumstances. They did talk about the whole statutory thing between Hoover and his peon that he was sending out to get him, but like it was a different time. But he did have an affinity for younger women, which when you think about is, again, it's not like this, it's not the same then as it is now, but it's still a problem. Like even Una was 18 and he was like 50 something when they got married. I mean, there's an issue. I mean, at least she was 18, right? But
you know what bugged me? So you have what's the actor's name? Mila Jovovich.
Yeah.
So she was playing his, child bride.
Yeah.
At 16-year-old.
Yeah.
Like her scene, her nude scene. She's 16. Yeah. I
I
was like, oh, great fucking job, guys.
Yeah. I know.
Like, what are you doing?
But at the time.
Yeah, well, at the time when Chaplin was doing it, sure, but we're talking 30 years ago when it was released.
Well, I know, but even then, the law was as long as the actor is over, is 18 or over, it doesn't matter the character. Now it's different. They can't.
Oh no, I think Mila Jovovich was only 16 then, wasn't she?
Ooh, I don't know,
dude. Now I gotta know because I thought I read something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. Let's see, when's her birthday?
75.
So
she's close. She'd be close. 17 or well, if they're filming earlier, she was like 16 or 17 during filming because she would have been 18 in 93.
Oofty.
Yeah, so it's like we didn't fix the problem, guys.
Yeah, that's not good. I didn't know that. Like I had no idea.
So that was one of the things because Chaplin did like younger women, and in that time, if you're Chaplin, all for it, go for it, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
And but at the same time, I was like, we didn't fix the problem. 80 years later, guys, way to go! That when we're filming the biopic or the biopic about it, we're just gonna throw this underage nudity in there for kicks and giggles.
Yeah. Yikes! I didn't know that. I didn't know she was that young. Guys. I did not know. I would have assumed that she was 18 or older.
Right, but I looked it up because I was like, wait a minute. Because I was like, but yeah.
Wow.
So you have, it's almost like, the problem still hasn't been fixed like we talked about, but
sure.
You're now advertising that we haven't fixed the problem.
Oh no.
Like burn a calorie, guys, and think about what you're doing before you're actually going to do it.
Yeah, for real. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Mila Jovovich was a great casting for that because she looks almost just like her. But I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe Mila Jovovich lied about her age time. I don't know. That's crazy to me.
Could have been.
No idea.
But at the same time, it's like, do you really need to throw that particular scene in there, right? Because one of those things like, hey, let's cover our bases. Because we can still show the relationship, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. But like, way to go, guys.
Well, and I'll be honest, like, other than the first scene where he's at the vaudevillian stage and like he's backstage with the women, and you get to kind of give an insight on his obsession with sex and women, in his personal life, like that, understand, because he grew up back there, which means as a child he was being introduced to that level of nudity and them changing clothes, and I'm sure he's been tying up their bonnet or their dresses and stuff since he's a child. But so I got that part, but there was some other nudity throughout this movie that I'm like, and look, I love nudity, don't get me wrong, I'm not bitching, I'm
all
not
for it 100%.
Yeah, I'm not Matson. Like, I don't complain about tits and ass and penises in movies. Like, I don't care about that shit. However, there were some scenes, including this one that you're talking about, where you see Mila Jovovich's ass, and then you got Diane Lane showing off her knockers, and I'm like, it's just unnecessary. Like, it doesn't. I'm for nudity that adds to the film, or if it's a film that I'm like, this movie sucks, so I need to see some nudity.
Yeah. Show me some boobs.
This isn't that. So like, I did have moments, and again, I don't care. Like, I'm not bitching and saying, oh, they needed to cut that out. I mean, they needed to cut Mila Jovovich's ass out, knowing now that she was at best 17. However, I don't care. Like, I'm not sitting here going, oh no, nudity. I'm saying it didn't add anything to this film. Some of it. The early scene, yes. Help me understand. All for it. The later scene, I'm like, it doesn't add value to this movie. But that's the 90s too. Like the 90s, there was a lot of nudity for the sake of nudity in those films.
We got the R rating. Let's go ahead and use it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We might as well show some very nice nakedness throughout. But so have you read his biography, his autobiography? I haven't either, and I want to. Every time I watch this movie, I'm like, I really need to read that.
I want to read it now. But I was more like, I kind of said, I was staying away from a lot of the Chaplin stuff so I could just enjoy what Chaplin created.
Sure.
I live in my own little bubble of ignorance because ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Now I do want to read it because Robert Downey Jr. did a really good job of making me want to go read it.
Yeah. Well, and I love those scenes where he's talking to his editor and he's like going through with George. He's like, this is why I chose this. And you can see that the editor's like, well, we should probably do this and we should probably do that. And he's like, but that's not why I did this. That's not what my mindset was. They don't need to know that about me for me to tell them my story and have them. So I found that I liked that part. And I like the fact that of a lot of biopics, because one of my big beefs with biopics in general is the inability to trust, because I can't, right? Because there's no way. You have to have some creative license when you're doing a movie, period. And when you're doing a biopic, you can't. We've talked about this throughout the month. People's lives are just not that interesting in general to make a movie about them. So you have to really kind of create that interest and that level of intrigue through creative license. I don't know. And again, this is all speculation, but based on the conversations that he had, he understood that even for his autobiography. Like, there's pieces of this that people don't want to read about and they're going to be bored. So I'm not going to tell that part of the story. I'm not going to do that, even though his editor wanted. So I'm curious, because this is based on two different books, his autobiography and then a biography that was written by someone else, how much license was taken within the film, because it feels like there wasn't a ton.
Yeah.
But I don't know enough about it to know whether there was, like we talked about, is, Catch Me If You Can, how there's a ton, right? And that's partially because of who it's about. We know there's a ton in Walk
the Line?
Yeah, Walk the Line. We know there's a lot in Walk the Line because there weren't a lot of people that were around, and it wasn't like there's like a ton of documentation and so these conversations were happening. However, and even in Walk the Line there was less because he consulted for the movie, and then we know there was none, hardly at all, for the King's Speech, which is why it's so fucking boring. But then you have this one that I'm like, how much was there when it's based off of his autobiography? How much did he? I don't know. So I'm intrigued. How much did he
change it or adjust it?
Yeah.
Because he was that true entertainer, right? Would he adjust something, tweak something for a better story?
Yeah.
Or leave something out because he didn't see it as important?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I could easily see that happening.
Sure.
One of my favorite scenes in this, because I knew he was a workaholic, right?
Yeah.
But one of my favorite scenes is when he's in the, room or whatever, and he's got just Chinese takeout dinners, open drinks and everything. And his wife's like, hey, we're supposed to go somewhere like 4 days ago. And he's like, pretty much like, what month is it?
Yeah.
Like, he would get so into his work that you talked about this, like his personal relationship would just suffer.
Mm-hmm.
But still, despite that, he somehow managed to stay on top of Hollywood, which is a very, glad handing, shaking babies, kissing hands type of a thing. To where he and that just goes to show how good he was with his content, because he sucked at, the whole kind of promote yourself type of a thing. He
Yeah.
was the best because he was the best, and he worked hard to be the best. He probably could have done a whole lot less and still been the best if he could talk to people.
Yeah.
But he was that person who couldn't really do so. And so, he would just, crunch time. I think we talked about this, The Immigrant, where he would crunch time and he like edited it in 4 days.
Yeah.
And he didn't sleep the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he's cutting film and pasting it back together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love that same scene you're talking about, because you watch it was masterfully done, because there's a progression, right? You see that they're doing the scoring for the film and the sound editing and things like that. And you see this poor composer like progressively look more and more like shit along with Chaplin. And then, to your point, Diane Lane comes in and goes, "Is this how you lost your other wives?" And he's like, "Probably, but you'd have to ask them." Like, that line to me is so genius, because he's not wrong. He doesn't know why they left, because he doesn't care. They leave and he's like, "Okay, I'm done. I paid him.
Yeah, I'll go find a new one."
Yeah, someone else will come up. I also love the line too when he's talking to his editor and he's like, "Oh, I loved her. Yeah, she's the only one that didn't take me for a fortune." Well, and they stayed friends. Like, her future husband, her next husband, and her moved to Switzerland close to he and Una. So like they remained friends, which they were friends before they got married. So it was like one of those things where
a little bit.
Yeah, that helps maintain that. Whereas the other two were just, it was just young.
Thought he was their ticket to the spotlight and realized, oh no, he cares more about the movies than he does me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then the Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs girlfriend in the middle of all that, you're like, yeesh kebabs, dude. I hope it was good, because she was nuts.
Yeah, off her rocker nuts.
Yeah, was that Joan Barry? Who was that?
I think so.
I think it was Joan Barry. She had a hard life, that one. Yeah, it was Joan Barry. Oof. That's the thing. There's so many interesting characters that surrounded this man. Like, it's crazy to think of like all the people that he hung out with and worked with. Like, these are like I love that they were randomly dropping. Like, he was talking to Diane Lane's character, and she was talking about auditioning for Scarlett from Gone with the Wind, and then she just randomly, they say that Katie or whatever's got it wrapped up.
Katie Hepburn.
Yeah, Katie Hepburn, but she didn't get it. But like, you're like, just, it would have been amazing to think about like the people that he knew simply through, whatever. It's just crazy to me. But I love the way that it portrays him and going through it. And I think it's great writing coming from a biography. Like, you really know they leaned on that source material, the 2 books that they used, because it just goes down the line and shows his story. You know what I mean? And like, the other thing that I love is that because I don't know how accurate this is, but I'm curious. I've never looked at, I don't know that there's many pictures of that, his first love. Was it Kitty? Hetty. And then Una, they used the same actress to play. They used Moira Kelly to play his first love and Una. And I also wonder how much of Una, like, because they had, 8 kids, and they lasted for the rest of his life. But how much of that was because they got together at the end of his career? You know what I mean? Like, if he continues making movies, does he alienate her as well because of his workaholic status? Or was he kind of, because he was getting up in age at that point, but he was, he understood that his character, the tramp, wasn't going to last the talkies. That's why he only did 5 of them. That, and he got pushed out of the country. But like, it's interesting, the circumstance. Like, I think to me, that's the most intriguing, what might have happened. He doesn't get run out of America. Talkies don't become a thing. Therefore, kind of eliminating the need for the tramp, because he's not wrong. Part of the appeal to the tramp is you don't hear him talk except in one film. So it's like, that takes away from the mystery of that character. So I was really interested in that take on it. And then, so I'm always curious, like, does Uno last the way that they did if he continues making films, or is this victim of circumstance thing it's a curious question, and there's no way to answer it, right? But
yeah, and I really like that scene where he's like picking on this poor delivery guy for like brings him right into the argument about talking with the tramp.
Yeah,
and just the poor guy trying to answer. Starstruck.
Yep.
But it does show once again that he was brilliant.
Oh yeah,
right? And he knew that you couldn't push this character there.
Yeah,
it's done. We're done. This is the money maker. This is how I made all my money, but it's not going to last. We're going to leave it on a high note.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas anybody else, I think, would have been like, "Oh yeah, we're doing it. Like we're gonna make a killing if we can talk with the tramp. Like what else could we do? We could do so much more."
Yeah. Could you imagine Hollywood today? Like we'd have a tramp movie every month.
Oh yeah.
Because like they're like, oh, it's the only thing that works. We got to reproduce it 9 ways from Sunday. We'd have 2 TV series and 18 movies.
Yeah. Great.
Fuck. And none of them would be good. That's the problem. Yeah. The first one would be the only one that'd be worth watching.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Yeah, I'm with you. Like the fact that he was able to have this character for decades and be as famous and popular, and every movie's good. You know what I mean? It's not like there was a stinker in there with the tramp. Like if you go back and watch, like some are better than others, but there's none of them that I'm like, that's a shitty movie. You know what I mean? Like that's terrible. It just doesn't happen, which is another. And this guy's pumping out movies like all the time, and they're still that good. So it's like, it's another testament to his genius. But I think the scene that gets me, like, there's a lot of great scenes in this movie. It's long, 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's long, but I don't know. It's kind of feels the same way for me, at least, that the King's, where you talked about the King's speech. I don't know what I would cut from this movie to shorten it, because I think the thing with this movie that for me was been different than the other movies we've watched is every other movie, we finally even figured out in the King's speech, you're like, we could have cut some of these scenes. Every other one, like, I'm like, there's pieces that I just didn't need, and that don't add to the story. Even though I think it's a little long and there are moments that it drags, like, I'm like, I don't know what I would change, because every piece of information that you get about Chaplin and how he did things and what drove him to who he was has impact in this movie. So it's a hard one for me, because I do feel like it's a little long, but I don't know what to cut. And I think that's the tricky part about this movie, is because the scenes are so good, the movie as a whole kind of suffers from the length. But
I would cut the beginning, but that's just me.
That's fair. That's fair.
But
him being a child does drag a little. That's fair.
But I think what this movie does better than the others is the way it breaks it up between old Chaplin telling the story and what we're actually watching.
Yeah.
You get a little bit of it in Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
Where they do that, but they don't do it very well, I'll say. This movie does it a lot better, where you have these breakups where there's 2 or 3 minutes of older Chaplin telling a story, and then we go back.
Yeah.
And so that to me eliminates a lot of what you need with the cutting.
Yeah.
Because it finds a way to break itself up, where some of these sequences could potentially go for a little bit longer and start to get draggy and boring. We break it up, change scenery, older, Chaplin talking.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. The last thing I want to talk about is, it was my favorite scene, which is the final scene. Like, man's been exiled for X amount of years, and even in the middle of that, once Hoover was gone, they were very quick to say, "Hey, come back."
And he was like, "Fuck you."
Yeah, he's like, "Kiss my ass."
Yeah.
And because and I love that he said that line to George. He goes, "I never got an invite." It wasn't an invite. It was "Hey, you're welcome to come back if you want." There was never a "please come back" until the end, when they want to honor him with in the 70s with this honorary Oscar, which was great that they did that. And then he gets an invite and he comes back, right? And like, I love that moment where he feels like everything that he's done is irrelevant and he never made a difference. And, nobody anymore, especially now, he hasn't done anything for 20 years, 30 years. So nobody knows who he is or wants. And then he's standing on this stage waiting for his chance to accept this award. And he's watching his work on the screen, and he's hearing the crowd laugh and cheer. And like, man, those moments, like, I'm not a huge fan of like the streaming tear moments in movies. I'm like, come on. But that one gets you, because I bet he did. Like, it would not surprise me if that man sat up there and just had this moment of, holy shit, I did do good shit. Like, I went through a lot to do it. I had a hard life. I had a great life. I had some difficulties. I got exiled. All this shit happened to me. But at the end of the day, like, I made an impact. Like, what a great thing to be able to realize. Because I think there's a lot of people that don't actually get to see the quote unquote fruits of their labor and the impact that they had. But he had that moment where there's an industry that would not be what it is today. One of the most there was a joke in a movie, like a TV show I was watching, like, if you stopped making movies for less, like a year or two, and took all the money that we spent on making movies, you could solve homelessness in the country. And I mean, the amount of money, and that's the industry. And if it weren't for him, it wouldn't be as successful as it is. So I love that moment, and how it ends with going back to his real, it doesn't end with him as the old man. It ends going back to showing the tramp, which I love. Yeah. I thought it was great.
Yeah. I like that scene too, because I think it shows did a really good job of showing, like, he was actually pretty humble of a person. He had this Chaplin kind of persona, the tramp persona and stuff like that, but he never really would say, I'm the best because I'm the best, right? And I'm the best person for this. I'm the greatest ever type of a thing. He was making movies all the time because he was trying to still stay relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed a little bit where he, right at the beginning with Dan Aykroyd, where he was like, I can direct, I'm the best type of a thing. And I would think that would be some of the creative license, because I don't think he ever really had that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Where he was the best. And so, I mean, you take 40 years off, and if you think that you have to make a movie every week, every month, 6 movies a year to stay relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see the whole, they're not going to know who I am. Like, this is a sham.
Yeah.
Whatever, they're going to make fun of me. Type of a thing.
Yeah, I loved it. And especially what really triggered him to have the emotion is the laughter. Yeah. Like, when everybody starts laughing and rewatch. And I mean, this is, like you said, 30, 40 years later. Like, silent films haven't been a thing for decades.
A long time, 30, 40 years.
Yeah. And so now you're like looking at this man going, he still is funny. In what he did still holds up. And we talked about it in our podcast.
It holds up now, 100 years later.
Yeah. If you're not Mattson and can't watch a silent film without being bored, like, if you can see the value in what they're doing and see that point, like, it still holds up. He's still funny as fuck. So it's just one of those things where I love that that's how they chose to end the film. So, all right, should we rate it?
Let's do it.
Okay. My film, I'll go first. This was, just so you know, this is a film that if I didn't include it, I would have got murdered. It's kind of like your, the couple that you did for Darko. Yeah. If I hadn't put this on the list, I might have gotten castrated in my sleep. So, because this is Casey's one that she loves Chaplin, I think, more than you love Chaplin, which is impressive because, I love Chaplin. She loves Chaplin. And for her, it started with his song Smile. Like, that's what got her. And then she's like, oh shit, this guy's a genius. So, I'm glad we did this movie. I love this film. This, for me, shows the genius of Robert Downey Jr. that we've all seen now. But it gets forgotten that he was just as good when he was younger. He just had that stint of being, having problem with alcohol and drugs, which a lot of people go through. But I mean, it is what it is. And I love that he's come back, but this was probably peak young Robert Downey Jr. And you get to see, to your point, he recreates things that you shouldn't be able to recreate. And while he had some work to do on the voice and I don't love the prosthetic teeth, that's one of the things that bothers me throughout the film. But I also know they didn't have the makeup skills that back then that they do now. So, but overall, I love this movie. I love the story it tells. It's entertaining. I think it does Chaplin justice, not only his successes, but where he falls short as a human being, and as a husband and things like that. I love that it tells all of that about him, right? Like his tortured life made him the success that he was, and vice versa. So it's like so interesting to me. It's not a perfect movie. It is long. It's a lot to tell a story, but again, it's a little long, but the cast is outrageous. So good. Everything is done very well, and it's very entertaining and very educational at the same time. I think I've been dreading scoring this, but I'm going to give it a 4. I think it's also takes the right audience. Like if you're not interested in knowing anything about Chaplin and who he was and what he did, like then it's not the movie for you. But if you're interested in what made Hollywood based on this one person and their influence and impact on it, yeah, this is it. It's a good movie. So giving it a 4. I'll definitely watch it again. I'd watch this movie almost anytime. I think you have to have some time because it's heavy. It's a heavy movie, but it's great. I love it.
All right, my turn. Let's see. I think I'm going to come in with a 4 as well. So the beginning of this movie I really did not like, and I really didn't even like Robert Downey Jr. as Chaplin until the Tramp scene, where he creates the Tramp character. From then on, you can really, I think, see the dedication he put in. Even to the point where they're playing like tennis or pickleball or whatever. Mm-hmm. He's playing left-handed because Chaplin was left-handed. Like Robert Downey Jr. went out and learned how to swing a racket left-handed for this movie, for the dedication of it. And so that goes back to what you're saying. The brilliance that Robert Downey Jr. is, because he's creating a character that should be impossible to recreate. It's a little bit what we talked about earlier in the month with Joaquin Phoenix being able to sound like Johnny Cash. Nobody should be able to do that. Robert Downey Jr. should not be able to do what he did like Chaplin did. Yeah. But he pulls it off. And so it comes down to like the voice, but the fact that he can pull it off with the physical comedy is much more important than the voice.
Sure.
In my opinion. So I'll be watching this movie again. I'm glad that I watched it. It didn't have the, terrible, there goes my hero kind of vibes that I was scared of. So I'm glad I watched it. 4 for me. We'll be watching it again. But yeah, it was a good one.
Love it. It's a good month. A lot of high scores this month.
Yeah.
Good movies for the biopic month. And that wraps it up. So with that, Alec, tell everybody where they can find us when they're not listening to us talk about Chaplin.
Happy to. We got canceled last week, so we'll see if we're back. So thank you for tuning into our review of Chaplin. So this wraps up our biopic month, whatever that is. I'm so glad we don't have to say that anymore.
I know, right?
So this was a JJ selection and a really good one. So huge thank you to our patron Cholula Water for selecting it this month. And we have a few more categories locked and loaded. So if you want to get involved in the voting process for the movies in those specific words are hard categories, head over to Patreon where you can get those perks. With that, I'll kick it back to the Colossus of Clout, the Titan of Terror, a JJ.
Yeah. Patreon's where it's at. You get a lot of involvement. We also send out in between scenes as we're recording this shit. Like,
that's the funny stuff right there.
Yeah, you get a lot of behind the scenes content when I have to step away because there's freakouts happening in my house or like garage doors breaking and shit. Like, there's all sorts of fun shit going on in between recordings. So go check that out. But yeah, as always, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Cinemagical.
Whoa!